Cool. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started. As people join, they might miss my intro and a little bit about why I'm using so many stock photos, but hopefully they keep it, or hopefully they'll realize it's supposed to be ironic. Today we're going to talk about automotive and transportation world changing with COVID. I am Carlee. I'm from Vroom. I have officially been at Vroom for a year now. Previously, I was in fintech. Yes, that's my senior photo with a flip phone. I tried to make it go viral at one point, and that didn't really work out. So now I'm a product manager. Kidding. But basically, I've been a product manager at Vroom for a year. I lead the Vroom's iOS and Android apps. Before Vroom, I was working in fintech, both in B2C and B2B. And then before that, I was a UX designer. A little bit of background around me is I love mass transit. I love talking about bike lanes. I'm actually going to tone it down a little bit for this presentation to focus on how COVID adjusted our roadmap here at Vroom. But if anyone ever wants to talk more, let me know. I will talk about bike lanes forever. Another thing I should mention is that I love stock photos, and the cheesier the better. So you'll notice I'm using a lot of them. I'm keeping the watermarks on them because I think it makes it even better. And I want to be a stock photo model in my other life, or going viral with this senior picture. So I'm going to move on to to a favorite stock photo of car buying. So hopefully you will notice this is ironic use of it. That's fine. But today I'm going to go through how COVID changed the way that people moved around, whether it be in bikes, trains, cars, or the fact that we barely moved around while we worked from home. Vroom is in the automotive e-commerce industry, and I'll talk a little bit more about that soon. And our app and how we adjusted to these changes. So pre-COVID, my favorite thing to do was take mass transit. Uber and Lyfts were basically second nature to me, and probably many of us at any given point of the day or night. Biking was still a thing, but it was mostly a thing hipsters or city people did, only in nice weather. I don't know if anyone else remembered, but it felt like daily there was some hot take on how the car industry was dying and no one wanted to buy cars. This is all pre-COVID. And even pre-COVID, the car industry was a little different than it is now. In 2019, the used car industry sold about 400 million units in 2019 with $841 billion in used car sales. To compare, new car sales accounted for 636 billion, so that was less. The used car market, though, is pretty fragmented. There's over 42,000 different dealerships and millions of peer-to-peer transactions. There isn't a single majority leader in the market. In addition, if we talk about car buying, which I'm sure we all have experienced in some way or another, 81% of the people were actually dissatisfied with the car buying process, according to a survey in 2016. So as we talk about more with Vroom, and I've been here for a year, Vroom's been around for about 4 or 5 years. Vroom was positioning itself as a better way to sell cars and buy cars. We are increasing our national marketing spend in 2019. Our app had just launched with our iOS app in February of 2020, and the Android app launched a few months before that. The app was really positioning itself as a shopping app. And it felt like basically the moment we launched our app, and we're still kind of dealing with those tweaks and things we missed out on that first release and the MVP launch, you know how it is, COVID hit America in March of 2020. So if you look at stock photos for COVID, they're absolutely horrible. There are more people happy than not, which is interesting. But this is stock photo. We're going to go with the COVID as we talk about it. We don't really need to talk about much about COVID. We're still in the thick of it. But there was a lot of uncertainty in March of 2020. Personally, I remember going in to quarantine and not really knowing how things were going to go at Vroom. We weren't sure if people were going to stay with people staying home in quarantine. Like, would they even buy a car? Would they even want to sell their car? We weren't really sure. But mass transportation numbers were dramatically decreasing, obviously, as people were staying. And so did ride share usage. Gone were the days of Ubers, Lyfts, at any moment of the time. We were no longer taking Ubers to the airport to travel. I was no longer taking the tram to work, which was my favorite part of the day. But biking grew and bikes were selling out. And according to this previous New York Times article, which actually was beautiful, the commuter and fitness bike sales increased in March of 2019, 66%, which is quite a lot. Leisure bikes jumped 121%, and electric bikes rose 85%. There was actually, even in that New York Times article, a statistic about a bike shop in Brooklyn who had a 600% increase in sales based on the previous year. 600%, which is insane. And it was so hard to find a bike to buy. They were sold out, and we all know how Peloton was doing during this time too, which is also in the fitness bike and commuter. In addition to bike sales growing, so did car sales. There was a Vroom boom, which, contrary to popular belief, this article is not about Vroom specifically. It's about car buying increasing, but we'll take it. According to the data in this New York Times article, the DMV processed 18% more registrations based on the same time of last year. In other states, we were seeing similar increases happening. Great. People are buying cars. That's wonderful. But before we get more into the Vroom boom, which in fact did increase car buying, let's talk a little bit more about a lull in the automotive industry right before this Vroom boom. So going back to March of April, we're all basically home in sweats, totally unsure what to do, what's going on. Most of us, if you're anyone like me, thought this was going to last like a few weeks. I kept a sweater at the office and a book that my coworker loaned me, and it's still sitting there. So we thought this was only going to be a little bit. But late in March, we as a country still had no idea what we were in for. There was this pandemic, and we weren't sure what the magnitude of that was. And during the last 2 weeks in March, Vroom saw a 15% increase in e-commerce demand. So most people were still hoarding toilet paper and canceling vacations, which probably aided in the decrease in e-commerce demand, especially for the second most expensive thing you buy in your life. Also during late March, we at Vroom reduced vehicle prices in order to drive vehicle sales. And we wanted to quickly reduce the amount of inventory that was purchased pre-COVID. And basically we paused on all of our vehicle acquisitions, other than some trade-ins. So we weren't buying any cars from users from anywhere else either. And as a result, we significantly reduced our total inventory levels. So that led to a really interesting app. Like I said, we positioned ourselves as a shopping app. We had just launched it. We were pretty happy with how things were going, and we were kind of trying to monitor what people were doing. And one that posed for shopping was kind of hard to get users to retain if there was minimal inventory for them to shop. So during the first few months of COVID, we knew our app usage was still higher on the weekends. We assumed it was probably people stepping away from the computer where they spent like a majority of their weekday, but our retention was decreasing during March and April. We can't blame users though. We had less and less inventory every day to look at. And the ones that were on there were usually marked sale pending. So we were still getting a decent amount of pre-COVID installs and traffic, but we just could not retain these users. So we decided to try some things. This is a stock photo. I can't remember what I searched for it though. But basically we're going to talk about the good, the bad, the ugly, but more so what the things we tried to do to adjust our roadmap during this time. Some things on here that we ended up doing this year were definitely not on our roadmap for this year at all. We were probably going to nail the discovery process to get users their dream car, and we were going to increase conversion on our checkout experience. Things changed though. So here's a story about our push notifications. For those joining, the stock photo is supposed to be ironic, but I actually might use this more often. So here's a story about push notifications and the features that went along with it and that we tried during this time. So back to us adding inventory to our cars in March of 2020 through probably the end of April. Vroom tried to sell as much of our current inventory as we could. We did this by dropping vehicle prices. At the time, we were still reeling from working in sweatpants and at-home Zoom fatigue. And I went with our team and we said, if we're going to be dropping prices as a business, we should probably tell our users that. I'm sorry, my dog is now deciding now is the time to drink water during this time. So basically back to we are dropping prices. And by the time we talked as a team, we scoped the feature. On apps, the initial setup of push notifications is usually a lot of work. And we said, okay, cool, we'll set up push notifications. We're dropping these prices. Let's help them. Let's help these users get going. And we were ready to start this. And then basically we scoped it, we talked about it, we documented it. By the time we were ready, Vroom wasn't dropping their prices at all anymore. We had basically rid of most of the inventory that we were going to, and we missed our mark completely. And this was not we realized at that time, COVID was not the time for perfectly spec'd documented work with all of the edge cases and use cases worked out. So this was the push notification that never happened. We had good intentions, and we realized just how quickly during this, how fast everything changes. So once we had that failed price drop notification experience, we kind of took that to the next bit. So we went back to the drawing board. We vowed that we would be a little bit quicker and scrappier with scoping what's next. From a user standpoint, users were still actually downloading our app and hanging out in there, but they were opening the app way less. So we wanted Vroom to be, what do you do this time when, you don't have any inventory to sell, but they're coming to you and you know that you'll have inventory at one point. So we wanted users to think of Vroom, the Vroom app as the first place that they go to once they're ready to buy a car. But with limited inventory and choices, we really had to adjust. So we did a fairly common feature for e-commerce, back in stock. You see these a lot when you go to buy a sweater. That's usually my go-to example. The sweater's out of stock and you're saying, oh, well, just let me know when it's back in stock. So we took this, we basically said, let's set a deadline. Let's make sure we get this done in time before the business and the market changes. Because even at this time in late April to early May, we had no idea what was going to happen. We knew from some qualitative research, actually, that by the time users got to our app, they generally knew which make and model they wanted. So they were kind of deeper into the funnel of the shopping process than we originally had thought. So we kept notifications to just make and model related, basically to help us scope it a little bit smaller. So we said, don't worry about body type, don't worry about color or price. We think people just want to know when a new Volkswagen GTI comes into stock. So we gave ourselves this deadline and we were actually able to get it out. This helped our team get a little bit of a win. We watched our retention numbers during this time. We also used those search terms of what people were searching for to inform future things. And basically use those search terms to hopefully notice where people were ending up at a dead end and then hopefully being able to iterate on that. This feature actually increased our monthly retention by 9%, which we were very happy with. It's very typical. You search for the car, you say, we don't have this right now, tell us when it's in stock, and then we would give you a notice when it was in stock. The average user was basically searching for 1.8 make and model options and opting into 1.8 of them. Our open rates on these push notifications were upwards of 50%. And it was during this time that we learned that users actually like to receive, so the iOS opt-in where you say, hey, I want to receive notifications or not. We A/B tested basically and found out that if you were looking at whether to receive push notifications about your price drops or about new inventory, users are more likely to opt in to push notifications based on inventory messaging. So, and during that, we figured If people wanted to opt in and say they wanted price drop, then we'd build it later on. But we got the answer. People really cared during this time about new inventory. During this, basically, was the Vroom boom. So everyone was trying to desperately find a car if they weren't trying to buy a bike in Brooklyn at that one shop that had a 600% increase. Dealerships were also trying to do things similar and sell online and do, in-house or going to your house selling. And so this was a great time for Vroom, but it was also a good problem to have because basically we had users who wanted this. We had users who were desperate to buy a car and they were so excited and we just didn't have enough to show them. So the good news is, as Vroom started to buy more cars near the end of April of 2020, we had just another problem, but it was a good problem. We just wanted to increase retention. So users were still coming to our app to shop, but they were still seeing low inventory, despite seeing some back in stock messaging. And we knew they didn't want to wait forever. So the interesting thing was Vroom was still buying cars, but at Vroom we buy cars. So you see me petting the dog. Sorry, guys. At Vroom we buy cars and we basically recondition them, fix some of the defects internally, and then we list them. With COVID effects in our workplace, this was happening at a slower rate than usual. And even still, it doesn't happen instantly that we buy a car. So users were getting really antsy. They were calling our sales team saying, when can we get this? When do you have this car in stock? So across Vroom, as a cross-platform, we launched what we call available soon. Basically, we knew we had these cars. We didn't have them photographed or fixed yet, but we said, this Volkswagen GTI is almost available. I'm going to use Volkswagen GTI as an example a lot because that is the car I actually bought from Vroom, so it's my go-to. So we launched available soon. However, we still needed to get a hold of these users to let them know what was going on. The average number of times our users were opening the app on a daily basis was increasing. In theory, that sounds great, right? Like they're opening your app more. However, we knew that users were checking the Vroom app for updates of, is this car available yet? Is this car available yet? And they were kind of left with like no answer. We were giving no indication of whether this would be 5 days, 5 hours, 5 weeks. So they were left with that question. And it basically was a simple solution to saying to them, hey, that navy blue GTI you've been waiting for, Carlee, like how about we tell you when it's ready to buy? So we did that. We launched a cross-platform notification about these cars. Great. Why I label this feature as kind of just okay for us during COVID is it kind of posed a little conundrum for a user. If you are looking at 2 different GTIs, and this is a real story, if you're looking at 2 different GTIs, one of them is available and one of them has these great stock photos because we haven't photographed them yet, and they're coming soon. And you may prolong you might be waiting for the other one. Like you're constantly going to go back and forth and you're not sure if it's ready to buy. And the difference between buying a car and buying 2 different sweaters that are similar is often people will buy the 2 sweaters just knowing I'll just return the one I don't like best. You typically don't do that with a $20,000 car. So while these users were really excited, they were constantly going into our e-commerce funnel, switching back and forth. They weren't sure what to do. And so they're kind of holding out for one that might have a different trim. Do you wait? Do you start the purchase? I mean, that's really where we've left off. It definitely helps with retention and everything, but we weren't exactly sure what the user's thinking. So honestly, that's where we're kind of leaving off with the COVID examples, but we're in this we at Vroom are very, very fortunate in this time to have good problems to solve. The demand for car buying is increasing a ton, which is great. However, our app is moving on from a different portion. So what's next is we're kind of moving away from inventory updates and perfecting that search. And we're going to be adjusting to some new business requirements that really just have to do with helping Vroom buy more cars for users. The demand is so high that it's a great time to sell your car, wink, wink, anyone. And we want to basically have even more inventory selection for users as possible to keep up with demand. So like I said, that's a great problem. And that's what we're planning on doing now. That's definitely not what we were planning on in the beginning of the year at all. If you ask my team, we didn't think we'd be moving to the sell us your car experience. We didn't think that any of this would be happening, but I'm very happy with how we've done. And I'll leave you with my favorite stock photo examples. Women laughing, eating salad. I'm really bummed. I was going to do a series myself on being photographed this way, and then I just never did. But I would love to take questions. The dog has moved on a little bit, but maybe if he comes back, we'll intro. And I will stay in here and go through some of these questions, or have you guys tell me about your dogs first. Or we can talk about bike lanes. Yeah, so let me scroll up with a little bit of these. Yes, the bike wait list was crazy. I even went to go get my bike to get fixed, and that took forever too. So I know one thing, especially in that Vroom Boom New York Times article, it's a great article. I'll link it here. Basically, people reference New York City. They never thought you'd be buying a car. And now with some of our office in New York City, they're buying cars from Vroom. I'm sure, like Sydney, you said you would never even consider buying a car in New York. And Peter has a great example about neighborhood in Brooklyn, finding difficult to park in, even with this pandemic. Yeah, it's just a very interesting thing. User research, how do we learn from our customers? So Ron, we do a few different things. We sometimes with our design team, we work on some qualitative research and talk to them. We do user interviews. A lot of it's data driven and working with our data team and reading between the lines and launching something. We're a big A/B testing company. So we'll A/B test things and then use qualitative research to look between there and just try different things. It really just depends on the scope of the features, scope of what we're looking into. There's obviously lots we don't know. But like most of these features we found from qualitative research. And yeah, so that's basically it. Any other questions? Cool. Well, I ended slightly early, which is, Claire, we'll get some Vroom questions. Yeah, Vroom app. So basically with Vroom in general, we buy cars elsewhere. So it isn't a peer-to-peer model. It isn't a peer-to-peer model. So we typically have the cars on hand, typically. And then we go to sell them. We have a warranty that's within Vroom. A lot of our cars have manufacturer warranty still included. We have the Carfax report. Our goal is to be as transparent as possible when selling these cars, so you know everything that's going on, including little defects that we have about those cars that we have opted not to fix, just like normal used cars. We do see different trends based on different parts of the country. We've also seen a trend in our pricing strategy, or in our pricing and average prices. I'm not sure how much we're allowed to talk about. We make jokes internally, which is probably bad, about trying different categories based on your location that you're in. Someone's gonna laugh at me or tell me I was being rude, but basically we joke about having only white cars in Florida. Lots of Subarus on the West Coast. And we realize that you live in Seattle, we've talked about showing you just Volvos and Subarus. And in Michigan, anything with 4-wheel drive, because half of our team is in Detroit. Car storage facilities, or do the cars remain with the seller? Actually, when you sell your car to Vroom, which is half of our business, when you sell your car to Vroom, it's as simple as it is buying. We basically say, here's your offer, or here's your price. And if you accept it, great. We actually arrange to come pick it up and we take it off your hands and give you the money. And then we bring that on site, do some of the work, do the nice photographs. And that's basically how we do it now. We actually don't put buyers and sellers in touch. We kind of are the middleman in between all of that. And yeah, hopefully that answers your question, Claire. Yeah, Eric. Have we seen buyers becoming more or less price sensitive since COVID? Our average price has decreased in what we're selling and what people are buying. Yes, that's pretty much all we know and are saying at this time. Sorry, Dan, I wish I could give you more. But yeah, I'm guessing for the most part, we're not having crazy luxury vehicles. I will say that when it comes to web traffic versus app traffic, we do know that users of the app tend to look and shop for more luxury cars than on the web. That's the data we have. We don't have a lot of reasoning between that. We actually just found that out recently. So that was an interesting little tidbit. Between iOS and Android, both have more of a luxury vehicle market than the web side. Yeah, Claire, so basically we have filters and we have a luxury car category that we might show you on our Discover page. And we've seen a decent click-through rate with that. What's interesting with our Discover page is the click-through rate on it sometimes is great, except for they ultimately don't end up with that car. But as for a luxury car filter, we probably should. Yeah, they dream a bit. Yeah, and let's see if I can bring the dog up here, and that'll be how exactly I end. Look at this sweet boy. I hope that's not the only session that shows a dog. Yeah, so I'll stay around for any other extra questions. Yeah, Zach, let's talk about the post-purchasing experience. This is something we definitely thought we were going to be tackling in this year in our apps, especially. Right now, you basically say, I want this car, start purchase. And in the apps, we link to a web view of our e-commerce experience. You fill out information, personal information, whether you have a trade-in that you're applying, how you're going to be paying for it. We have options with your own bank financing, our financing. You can do cash, the warranty, etc. And then you put a deposit on it, and essentially that puts the car on hold, which labels it sale pending in our app and on our web experience. We definitely thought we'd probably be building that out natively this year, and then COVID happened, and we're still probably not building it out natively. Yes, Claire, we have a variety of payment. We work with some third-party partners for financing. You can always use your own financing and bring it. You can pay cash. And all of those have nothing to do with how quickly you get the car or the price on the car. Our price is our price. And the whole thing is no negotiating outside of, or there's no negotiating. We just don't want it to be like a dealership experience, you know, where you're not sure if you're getting the right price. Cool. Well, we're wrapping up. I'll stay for some extra questions or to talk about dogs or stock photos or bike lanes. And thanks, everyone. I hope this helped. I hope you got some ideas or at least learned how we made some mistakes along the way this quarter or this last few quarters. Thanks, everyone. Oh, my dog's name is Brooks. He's named after Herb Brooks, the 1980 hockey coach. Thanks.